She walked in at 6:17 a.m. The scent of stale perfume hit first, cheap, over-applied, and foreign to our home. Her heels clicked across the tile, like punctuation marks on a confession she wasn't brave enough to say out loud. She didn't expect me to be up, but I was. Not out of suspicion, out of habit. I always got our son ready for school. She used to help. That was back when girls' night meant wine and Netflix with Laura and Kim, not overnight absences and cab receipts from districts where none of them lived. I was kneeling, tying our kids' sneakers, when I saw her in my periphery. Hair still curled from last night. Our makeup smudged like she'd either cried or didn't care. Girls' night ran late, she said, voice light, too light, like she was hoping I'd skip the obvious. She didn't even look at me, just dropped her clutch on the counter and opened the fridge like nothing was off. I pulled the last knot tight, stood up, and said, "Hope it was worth it." She froze for just a second, just long enough. Then the smirk returned. That same smirk I used to love when it was meant for me. "Why are you so cold lately?" I turned away, grabbed the lunchbox I packed every damn day, and handed it to our son. "Practicing for when you're gone." Her laugh was loud. Too loud. Forced and sharp and meant to puncture the air, like she was trying to reassert the upper hand. "Okay, dramatic," she chuckled, eyes darting, calculating. But I didn't laugh. I didn't even blink. I just stared at her and said, "We'll see." She blinked first. What she didn't know, and never stopped to consider, was that I wasn't guessing anymore. I wasn't fishing or hoping or spiraling. I knew. Not from texts, not from some cliché lipstick on a collar or a stranger's tip. I knew because she changed, but not in the way people think. It wasn't the missed dinners or sudden gym obsession. It was the silence, the smugness, the invisible contract she thought she was holding over my head, and the smell, not of him, but of the absence of fear. You can always tell when someone isn't afraid of losing you anymore. I was done confronting. That's what she expected. A messy argument, a thrown glass, a desperate "who is he?" No, what she got instead was distance. Calm, studied distance. The kind that makes people nervous, not because of what you say, but because of what you don't. And since you're here, if you've made it this far, do one thing for me. Hit subscribe. More than 90% of people who hear stories like this never do. But it keeps our little crew running, and trust me, what's coming? You'll want to be here when the last card hits the table. She left the kitchen that morning without finishing her coffee. The mug sat half full, lip print smeared. She didn't ask me if I'd be home that evening. She just said she had another dinner. "Laura's going through a rough time," she claimed. Laura, by the way, was in Florida with her fiancé. Sent me a photo from Disney Springs the night before. Funny how time zones work. My wife didn't know it yet, but I was no longer the quiet, dependable man she thought would sit in his office and move freight. That's how she phrased it once. I heard her on the phone. "He's harmless. He just moves freight and stares at spreadsheets." Sure, I move freight, but I also built the damn company from the ground up. And spreadsheets? They talk, if you know how to listen. Her lover, the so-called mentor, wasn't even subtle. A few expense patterns here, a few oddly timed vendor meetings there. Their first team-building trip to Austin was booked from her email, but his Amex. Sloppy, arrogant, but I didn't say anything. Instead, I started listening closer. Watching. Not just her, but everyone. She stopped wearing her wedding ring 3 weeks ago. Said it was pinching during yoga. She started calling our kid my son, in conversations, like I wasn't there. Subtle, but sharp. She made 2 jokes about prenups in front of friends at brunch. I didn't laugh. And the final straw? She changed the passcode on her phone. Not because she had something to hide, because she wanted me to know she had something to hide. It was a game to her. Power. Control. Leverage. She thought she was playing chess. She didn't realize I'd already flipped the board over. 8 months ago, I filed the paperwork. Quietly. Legally. No fireworks. No signature fights. Just a shift in voting rights and a delayed trigger clause set in motion. The company, my company, was sold. She just didn't know it yet. And the man I sold it to? Oh, she knew him. Very well. The game wasn't over. It hadn't even started. She opened her laptop like she always did, sleepy, unbothered, half-focused, the way someone does when they assume the world still works for them. Hair in a bun, glass of oat milk in hand. She clicked through Slack messages with one eye and flipped through Instagram with the other. There was a photo of Laura at the beach, Florida again, some ad for Lip Plumper, and a sponsored post about what powerful women wear to boardrooms. That one made her smile. Then she tabbed over to her work inbox, probably expecting some softballs, budget drafts, Q3 slides, a reminder about Friday's leadership lunch. Instead, the screen froze for a second, then refreshed. The subject line at the top wasn't from finance. It was from corporate. All staff, transition notification, effective immediately. She clicked it, probably still chewing on whatever smug thought was in her head. And then she saw it. One sentence. Centered, bold, no signatures, no fluff. Effective immediately, ANR Logistics has been acquired by Dentwell Holdings. It took her a full 6 seconds to understand what it meant. At first, she just blinked. Then her fingers moved, frantic, typing her father's number. Voicemail. She tried again. Then Jared. Straight to voicemail too. She switched apps and opened WhatsApp, scrolled past a group called Wine Witches Wineglass Nail Polish, and tapped on Dad, private. The messages there were dry. Clinical. Her father never typed much. But the last one stood out now in hindsight. Did you sign off on Q2 voting rights yet? Call me. Sent 5 weeks ago. She never replied. Too busy. Then at 10:22 a.m., the phone finally rang. Anna. Her father bellowed before she could even say hello. He sold it. He sold the entire goddamn company. She pulled the phone away from her ear, stunned. What are you talking about? He can't do that. Oh yes he can, her father growled. And he did. And you need to get to the office. Now. The line went dead. She stared at her reflection in the dark screen of her laptop, blinking like maybe if she looked hard enough, she'd see the explanation written there. Some prank. A mistake. Something reversible. But it wasn't. Dentwell Holdings wasn't just a buyer. They were the rival. The thorn in her father's side for over a decade. The firm that once tried a hostile takeover and got humiliated when her husband found a loophole in their debt covenants. The CEO, Clark Redden, had been publicly embarrassed at a logistics summit when Jared, her lover and mentor, joked that Dentwell couldn't manage a carpool lane, let alone a freight network. And now, that same man had just bought the building she worked in. She stood up too fast, knocked over the oat milk, didn't even notice. Her fingers shook as she logged into the internal dashboard. Half the tabs were already down. Under maintenance. She clicked on HRIS, access denied. Slack, kicked out. Her badge was still working. For now. She grabbed her coat. Forgot her bag. Didn't even brush her hair. Called Jared again. No answer. Tried again. Straight to voicemail. By the time she pulled into the lot at ANR's headquarters, there were 3 security guards posted outside. And they were checking badges. That's when the dread started to crawl. Not panic. Not yet. Just the slow realization that the ground she thought was solid had been swapped out from under her. Like stepping on a rug that turns into glass mid-stride. One of the guards scanned her badge. The light blinked green. He stepped aside. You'll need to head to the West Wing for briefing. Briefing? She asked, trying to summon that executive voice she liked to use when pretending she ran things. What briefing? I'm a vice president. He didn't answer. Just motioned down the hall. She walked in, heels echoing, hair a mess, last night's lipstick smudged just enough to make her look human. She passed familiar desks, but something was off. People looked up and then looked away, like they'd just been told Santa Claus was bankrupt and they had to pretend it didn't change anything. She reached the executive wing and saw the blinds on her office were shut. Behind the glass, someone was sitting at her desk. Not Jared. Not her father. Someone taller. He turned slowly, smiled, and that's when panic began to take over. Because she recognized the man. Clark Redden. The same one she and Jared once laughed about during drinks. The one Jared called the guy with dollar store teeth and Fortune 500 ambitions. Clark stood, walked to the door, opened it. Anna, he said, voice calm, measured, almost gentle. I remember everything. She felt her knees buckle, just slightly. But she didn't fall. Not yet. By the time Jared showed up, tie crooked, hair uncombed, the panic still half hidden behind his sales executive swagger, she was already pacing in the lobby like a lioness waiting for a cage to be lowered. She didn't even say hello, just grabbed his arm and hissed, "We need to get to my office." Now. Jared glanced around, pretending to wave at one of the interns, pretending it was still their building. Relax, he muttered. It's just some acquisition stunt. Probably a shell play. Dentwell doesn't have the liquidity to. But the double doors to the executive wing said otherwise. New security scanners. A fresh sign-in table manned by a face she didn't recognize. Middle-aged, serious, clipboard in hand. And behind him, a logo that hadn't existed there yesterday. Dentwell Holdings. The staff huddled like villagers outside a burning house. No one sure whether to run or keep filming. Half whispers. Nervous glances. One woman cried quietly near the espresso machine. Someone else asked if PTO balances would be honored under new leadership. The word restructure floated through the air like a virus. Anna stormed forward, badge in hand, marching like she owned the place. She always walked that way, even when she wasn't in control. The guard didn't move. "Ma'am, the West Wing is closed to non-clearance staff." She stared at him like he'd just grown a second head. "Non-clearance? This is my building." "Not anymore," he replied, and nodded at the glass behind her. Her office. Her corner space. The one she fought for during the last renovation, that she said had natural power because of the east-facing windows and private restroom. The blinds were pulled halfway open now. Someone else was inside. She stepped closer, ignoring the guard, ignoring Jared, who was now whispering frantically into his phone. The man inside was tall. Immaculate charcoal suit. Crisp white shirt. No tie. Confidence in human form. He was shaking hands with one of the tech directors, laughing politely. Calm. In that way only someone with all the cards could afford to be. Then he turned, and Anna's heart stopped. Clark Redden. Not a ghost. Not a rumor. Not a proxy. Him. In her office. In their company. And he wasn't there as a guest. He smiled when he saw her. It wasn't cruel. That would have been too easy. No, it was worse than cruel. It was gracious. Like he was letting her live in the seconds before the blade dropped. "Anna," he said as he opened the glass door and stepped out, voice low and smooth as a courtroom dagger. "It's been a while." She swallowed, her mouth suddenly bone dry. "Clark, I didn't know you were." He tilted his head. "Coming?" "No, I'm sure you didn't." Then his eyes flicked to Jared, who had finally ended his call and now looked as pale as unbleached paper. "Ah, Jared, still calling me carpetbag Redden behind my back." Jared opened his mouth, closed it. Clark smiled again. "I remember everything," he said, turning his attention back to Anna. "Every remark, every joke, every dismissive little note left out during your last budget presentation." "Oh, and Jared's leaked to Freight Weekly? The email calling us structurally obsolete, with glorified janitors in board seats." He chuckled softly. "Love that one." Anna felt the room closing in. The white noise of background chatter faded. Somewhere behind her, a printer beeped out a paper jam error like a faint scream. She reached out, maybe for the wall, maybe for Jared. She couldn't tell, but steadied herself. "I don't understand," she said, her voice suddenly far too small for the space she once ruled. Clark shrugged. "Of course you don't. Because you didn't have to. You've always had someone clearing the way. Your father, Jared, and, of course, your husband." Anna's stomach flipped. Clark continued, voice lower now. "You never once thought he'd see what was right in front of him, or that he'd care." He leaned just slightly closer. "But I did. I saw it all. And when the opportunity came to partner with someone just as underestimated, I didn't hesitate." She blinked hard, trying to shake the ringing in her ears. "Partner." Clark stepped back, gestured to the office behind him. "Senior strategic partner," he said. "Check the new nameplate." Then he turned, walked back through the glass door, and shut it behind him. This time, the blinds closed completely. Wednesday started with a lie. Anna walked into HQ like it was still hers. Like the glass hadn't turned against her. Like the whispers didn't follow her heels. She still wore her title like armor, Vice President of Strategy, even though the official org chart now listed her as consultant, pending review. She told herself it was temporary. A hiccup. Something her father could smooth out behind the scenes once this transition chaos passed. But by 9:12 a.m., reality started pulling bricks from under her feet. The first email bounced. Not hers, Jared's. She'd sent him a quick forward about rescheduling the West Coast integration call, and it shot back seconds later. Delivery failed. User does not exist. She hit refresh. Tried again. Same error. She checked Slack. Jared's name was gone. His profile erased. The little photo of him holding a tennis racket at a charity match vanished. Then her desk phone rang. Security. "Ms. Langston, could you confirm whether Mr. Jared Powell is in the building?" She blinked. I don't know. What? We just need confirmation. You're listed as his former department head." "Former." She hung up without answering. By 9:28 a.m., she had her answer. Through the glass pane near the south elevators, she watched two guards escort Jared out of the building. No shouting. No struggle. Just a leather messenger bag and the look of a man who finally realized he wasn't bulletproof. He didn't even glance back. Her phone buzzed with a new calendar invite. Town Hall. Mandatory attendance. 12 p.m. The sender? C. Redden. Clark wasn't hiding anymore. He wasn't playing polite either. This was now a stage, and she was part of the show. She spent the next 2 hours trying to salvage some kind of status, calling old department heads, reaching out to legal, even trying to find the name of someone, anyone, on the Dentwell acquisition team who might sympathize. No one answered. Or worse, they answered with tight, rehearsed phrases like, "I'm sorry, I'm not authorized to speak on that," and "you'll need to redirect those queries through the transition liaison." They weren't just ignoring her. They were afraid to be seen talking to her. By noon, the atrium was full. Over 100 staff, managers, coordinators, IT leads, warehouse floor liaisons, sitting in rows like schoolchildren waiting for their report cards. The projector screen glowed at the front. No preamble, no logos, just a single title. Q4 realignment. Cut the fat. The room fell quiet. Clark walked in, not flanked by lawyers or advisors, but alone. Cool, collected, sleeves rolled up like he was there to fix a leaky pipe, not gut an organization. He didn't use a microphone. "Some of you are probably wondering what comes next," he said. "So let's be clear." Click. The first slide, a chart labeled redundant leadership, pending review. Under it, 4 names. Hers was second. The blood drained from her face. Click. A second slide. Misuse of leave policies, ongoing audit. A blurry photo filled the screen. Her, smiling, holding a wine glass, dressed in white linen, sitting under string lights at a downtown bar she thought was discreet. In the corner, timestamp. Wednesday, 8:42 p.m. The same night, she had submitted medical leave forms citing stress and an urgent family matter. Someone gasped. A man in front of her actually turned and stared, mouth slightly open. Clark didn't blink. "All investigations are being handled by an external compliance auditor," he continued. "Transparency matters. Trust matters. We're not just restructuring. We're cleansing." Her hands were clenched so tight her nails bit into her palms. She wanted to stand, to scream, to say the photo was out of context, that it was a one-time slip, that she earned her leave. But nothing came out, because she knew he had more. And that silence, that pause he left hanging after the word cleansing, that wasn't a threat. It was a promise. The meeting ended with no questions, no applause, just the low hum of terminal dread. She didn't go back to her desk, because it wasn't hers anymore. That night she didn't go home. She didn't go to Jared's place either. He wasn't answering texts, calls, or even LinkedIn messages now. His profile had gone from Director of Operations at A&R Logistics to a blank gray circle that said, "This account no longer exists." So she drove, aimlessly at first, then with purpose, toward her father's townhouse in Ridgeview, the same one where they used to host post-strategy dinners and laugh about how clean the books looked after Q3 restructuring. Now it just looked dark, cold. She let herself in with the spare key, walked past the oil painting of the freighter ship her father had commissioned in '04, and went straight to the den. That's where he kept the old files. Not digital ones. Paper. The real stuff. Legal folders in fireproof boxes, each one labeled in his tight, slanted handwriting. She wasn't even sure what she was looking for. A loophole, maybe. Proof the sale was invalid. Something that could give her the leverage she once wielded so effortlessly in boardrooms. It took over an hour. 2 mugs of cold coffee later, she found it. A manila folder labeled CAP table, growth ERA. Inside, quarterly equity statements, investor side letters, even cocktail napkin sketches from the early years when the company was little more than 5 trucks, 2 laptops, and a promise. And then, there it was, tucked between a vendor agreement and a set of partially redacted investor notes. A clause. Simple, dry, unassuming. In the event of a full asset transfer initiated by the founding party, majority control may revert to the silent shareholder possessing 51% equity, per vesting protections established in Schedule D. Her eyes scanned it twice, 3 times. 51%. That was him. Her husband. She remembered the argument now. It was years ago, maybe 2017. He'd wanted the majority stake to secure a bridge loan. She and her father both agreed temporarily was fine. After all, she'd said, we're all on the same team. But the transfer never reversed. The paperwork never updated. Her father had let it slide. Too much going on. And she was too busy mocking Dentwell in conference rooms and sipping Chardonnay during off-site retreats to notice. She flipped to Schedule D. The handwriting wasn't even hers. It was her husband's. Silent shareholder rights to override board upon confirmed liquidity event. Confirmed. Like, say, a full-scale acquisition by Dentwell Holdings. He didn't just let this happen. He designed it. She dropped the folder. It landed with a soft thud that felt louder than it was. Her hands were shaking now, not out of rage, out of something worse. The knowledge that everything she'd built her confidence on, the smug control, the whispered assumptions that he was just good at numbers, was hollow. He hadn't reacted when she stopped wearing the ring. He hadn't raised his voice when she started locking her phone. He hadn't begged when Jared started showing up just to grab files late at night. He had smiled, nodded, packed their son's lunches, kept the books, and prepared. She sat there for almost 20 minutes in total stillness, knees pressed together, elbows on the glass table where they used to play Monopoly and joke that her father cheated by hoarding the orange properties. She finally whispered, "Oh my God," but it wasn't a prayer. It was a reckoning, because now she knew. It was never a fight. It was a forfeiture she didn't realize she'd signed. By Thursday morning, the silence had turned hostile. Her phone, a weapon once capable of flipping vendor negotiations and board decisions with a single text, had become a graveyard. She scrolled through names that used to matter. Ray Mendelson, VP of Finance. Vanessa Choi, HR lead. Gavin from Risk. None answered. Not a single blue checkmark on her messages. A few were read, then quietly ignored. The rest? Left untouched, as if her name alone had turned radioactive. She tried email next. Subject lines like important, clarification needed, and urgent request, transition meeting, fired off into the void. No replies. And then she saw it. One of her last desperate drafts, sent to 4 senior execs she'd once wined and dined at her house on New Year's Eve. "You all know me. You know this isn't right. Clark is trying to erase the very people who built this company. My father's legacy is at stake. Please, let's talk before this becomes irreversible." Unread. All of them. She stared at the screen, lips parted. The silence wasn't accidental. It was coordinated. She finally called Malcolm. He was the oldest member of the board, retired now, technically, but still a whisperer in key circles. He picked up on the second ring. "Anna," he said, voice low, exhausted. "I was wondering how long it would take." "Malcolm, thank God." She exhaled, stepping into her bathroom and locking the door even though she was alone. "Listen, I know things look crazy from the outside, but this Dentwell thing, it's a power grab. We need to. I'm not getting involved." The words hit like a backhand. "What? You heard me. I've been fielding calls all week. Everyone's walking away from this fire while you're still holding the match." "Malcolm, that's not fair," she snapped. "I didn't do anything. Clark is blowing everything out of proportion. This isn't about me. It's about the company and the transition." "No," he interrupted, his voice suddenly sharp. "This is about what you and Jared did to him." There was a pause, a silence she didn't know how to fill. "Did to who?" she asked, genuinely lost. Malcolm scoffed, and for the first time, there was something in his tone she'd never heard before. "Disgust. Your husband, Anna. You really think he didn't know?" She said nothing. 4 years ago, you laughed in his face during the offsite in Palm Springs. Called him logistics wallpaper in front of 2 department heads. You remember that? Jared stood behind him, making faces while you pretended he was invisible. You really believed he didn't catch any of it. That was a joke. No, Anna. He was the joke. You made sure of it. Her mouth opened. No words came. "I warned you back then. Said don't mix heat with home. You didn't listen." And then, click. He hung up. She stood there, phone pressed to her ear, blinking at her own reflection in the mirror. Her robe hung slightly off her shoulder. Her hair was tied back. She looked like someone playing a version of herself. Like someone pretending to be calm. But there was no calm. Only absence. That night, she sat in her home office with a glass of something she didn't even remember pouring, flipping through old LinkedIn messages. Congratulations from people she didn't remember. Flattery from employees she barely thanked. The ghost of a kingdom that now pretended she never ruled. One message caught her eye. Dated 2 years ago. From her husband. A joke. Just one line. "It's amazing how much you can learn in silence." At the time, she'd laughed. Now, she didn't even blink. Friday, 9:04 a.m. The conference room was colder than she remembered. Maybe it was the new ventilation system Dentwell installed. Or maybe it was just the absence of control. Hers, her father's, everyone's. The old framed photograph of ANR's founding team was gone from the wall, replaced by a minimalist print that read, "Disruption requires discipline." She sat at the long glass table, fingers clasped too tightly, trying to keep her breathing measured. Across from her, a trio of Dentwell legal reps organized their materials like surgeons prepping for an amputation. No one offered coffee. No one asked how traffic was. These weren't people interested in small talk. These were closers. Then the door opened. Her father walked in like a thundercloud, pinstriped, jaw locked, tie slightly skewed, because he'd gotten dressed in a rage. The kind of man whose entire identity was built on not being surprised. And yet here he was, looking like the world had changed overnight, and someone forgot to give him a map. He didn't sit, just threw his coat across the back of the nearest chair and barked, "Let's make one thing clear. This is not over." The lead counsel, an older man named Hirsch, silver hair, tie like a scalpel, barely looked up. "Of course," he said calmly, and slid a leather folder across the table. "But before we proceed with any assumptions, I'd like to direct your attention to page 3. Her father frowned, flipping through the document with the same disdain he reserved for competitors he didn't respect. Then he stopped. One line. It was all it took. Board seat designation, honorary. No voting authority assigned or retained following equity restructuring, 2018. The blood visibly drained from her father's face. His mouth opened, but no words came. She leaned in, her voice a low whisper. "He tricked you." Her father didn't respond. Because he already knew. He remembered the moment now, 2018, during a liquidity crunch when the numbers were tight and her husband had floated the idea of streamlining governance. He said something about legacy roles and clean optics for future investors. Her father had brushed it off, said, "Sure, as long as I'm still in the room." But her husband had never fought him, never pushed, just nodded, smiled, and drafted the paperwork. And now? Now he'd weaponized it. Hirsch continued, voice smooth, like he'd done this 1,000 times before. The acquisition terms were agreed to under full compliance. All necessary filings were reviewed and finalized with your family's equity proxy. You were notified of the transactional window per state regulation, and there were no objections raised. Her father clenched his jaw. Anna could see it happening, the walls closing in. The realization that the legacy he built had not just been taken, but surrendered, silently, under the assumption that trust could protect you in a room full of sharks. She tried to reassert control. "We want a meeting with Clark," she snapped. "Now, this isn't how you treat former partners. My father, your father," Hirsch interrupted gently, "no longer holds any relevant stake. And as of this morning, you are no longer listed as an internal consultant." She blinked. "What? Your access will be formally revoked by close of business." Her father looked at her. The first time he had really looked at her all week. There was no blame in his eyes, just quiet devastation, like watching someone realize they'd been walking toward a cliff they built themselves. She reached for the folder. Her hand brushed his. He pulled away, not violently, not with anger, just distance. Hirsch stood. "If there are any additional questions, they'll need to go through external counsel. We'll be retaining no further contact directly." No one else in the room moved. No papers shuffled. No pens clicked. The silence was thick, suffocating, not empty, but filled with the sound of power shifting hands. Her father finally spoke. Soft, measured. He knew every step before we took it. Hirsch didn't answer. He didn't have to. They left the room without shaking hands. No goodbye, no fake niceties. In the elevator, her father didn't speak. But when they reached the lobby, he turned to her and said, with a quiet finality she'd never heard in his voice before, "We were never in charge, Anna. We just thought we were." Then he walked out. Alone. Monday, 6:37 a.m. She woke up to her phone buzzing violently against the nightstand. Not a text. Not a call. Just a wall of notifications, Twitter, LinkedIn, email, even WhatsApp. Some messages came from old industry peers. Others from numbers she hadn't saved. The kind of chaos that smells like blood in the water. And in the center of it all was one subject line she couldn't ignore. Dentwell Holdings, press announcement. Executive realignment effective immediately. She clicked it, still half asleep, heart already picking up speed. The body of the email was short, brutal, corporate language sharpened into a guillotine. Effective immediately, executive realignment begins. Prior misconduct investigations are being reopened under new leadership oversight. Specific attention is being directed toward expense abuse, leave falsification, and conflicts of interest. There were no names listed, but she didn't need names. The rest of the industry filled in the blanks within the hour. A Reddit thread appeared on r/supply chain insider titled, "Dentwell just nuked NR's old guard. You know who's toast." Her name was in the second comment. Then a tweet from @Logistics Leaks posted a screen cap of her consultant, pending review title, followed by, "That didn't age well." By 8 a.m., she was trending on FreightLinked, the industry's boutique discussion board. An anonymous source had leaked snippets of an email thread, Jared's words, laughing about milking the old man's company dry while playing house with his wife. Another quoted message read, "At this point, I could slap the CFO and no one would notice." She gasped aloud, actually gasped, because she remembered the thread. The night Jared had one too many glasses of scotch and forwarded those jokes to her from his personal account, adding a little LOL at the end. She hadn't responded, but she hadn't deleted it either. She opened LinkedIn, heart pounding, ready to post a vague statement. Something about transition, about new chapters and lessons learned. Instead, she was met with a screen she'd never seen before. "Your account has been temporarily restricted due to suspicious activity. Please contact support to verify your identity." She blinked. Tried again. Same screen. She reached for her tablet. Same message. Then her desktop. Same lockout. Her professional life. Her persona, her curated empire of posts about scaling people, not just profits, was gone. Not deactivated. Not paused. Quarantined. By 8:31 a.m., a private Slack channel from one of her old consulting circles leaked screenshots of internal Dentwell documents listing her and Jared under a heading that read, "Legacy Risk Assets." Someone added a GIF of a dumpster fire. She texted Laura. No response. Tried calling her father. Straight to voicemail. Her inbox showed 23 new emails. Only one stood out. Subject, FWD, Formal HR Review Notice, Access Revoked. No greeting. Just an attached PDF. She opened it. Saw her name at the top. Then the sentence that hollowed her out. "Your employment status has been administratively closed due to risk evaluation and leadership conflict of interest. Per acquisition policy, all severance claims are now void." Void. No appeals. No back pay. No parachute. It was over. Not in a courtroom. Not in some screaming match or bitter HR phone call. But in a single click. A dozen years of networking, mentoring, side deals, holiday parties, softball games, late-night work trips, erased in a memo written by someone who'd probably never even met her. She sat on the floor of her bedroom. The sun through the blinds cast stripes across her bare arms. Her phone buzzed again, another Reddit mention. A meme. Her face photoshopped over a sinking ship. She didn't move. She didn't cry. She just stared at the screen. Because this wasn't a scandal. It was a strategy. And she'd never even seen it coming. Tuesday, 9:41 p.m. She was sitting at her kitchen counter, still in the same clothes from yesterday. The wine bottle was open, half drained, untouched. Her laptop glowed weakly across from her, screen frozen on a thread titled "The Logistics Coup of the Decade." They called it a masterclass, praised Dentwell's timing, marveled at the silence, the elegance. One commenter wrote, "This was war, and nobody fired a shot." She wanted to scream. But the house was too quiet. Her father hadn't returned her calls. Jared had gone radio silent. And the only messages she'd received in the last 24 hours were journalists fishing for comment and former interns pretending not to know her. Then her phone rang. No caller ID. Just a location tag, Ridgeview. Her stomach dropped. She answered. "Dad." The line was quiet at first. She could hear his breath, shallow, deliberate. When he finally spoke, his voice wasn't angry. It wasn't disappointed. It was hollow. "Everything's gone," he said. She didn't speak. "Our shares. My legacy. Your reputation." His voice cracked for the first time in years. "All of it." She blinked hard, gripping the edge of the counter. "He can't do this," she whispered. Silence. Then her father's voice came back, sharper now. Not loud. Just resigned. "Oh yes he can. And you need to see who he sold it to." Ping. Her laptop screen blinked. New email. Subject, FWD. Execution file, confidential. From her father's private inbox. She opened it. One image. A handshake. Her husband. Calm. Tie slightly loosened. That unreadable half-smile he always wore when people underestimated him. Next to him, Clark Redden. Smiling just as wide. Below it, a caption burned into the image like a brand. Acquisition date, 8 months ago. Conditions delayed by mutual strategy. She stared at it. No blinking. No breathing. Just stillness. 8 months ago. Before the demotion. Before the realignment. Before Jared started using words like leverage in bed. Before she ever imagined her husband could notice, let alone retaliate. He hadn't reacted when she came home late. He hadn't flinched when she canceled date nights, forgot anniversaries, left town with Jared for leadership conferences. He just nodded, took care of their son, folded laundry, and built this. Her fingers trembled over the mouse. She clicked on the file's metadata. The original upload date? 2 days after she told Jared that he'd never do anything. She remembered that night, laughing in the passenger seat of a rented black SUV, Jared's hand on her knee, the glow of a hotel bar still fresh on her skin. Michael, Jared had said. He's just background noise. She had smiled. Smug. Confident. Certain. She hadn't known she was already living in the wreckage. That the paperwork was already signed. That the men she mocked had been planning their response in silence. She stood slowly, walked to the fridge, opened it without thinking. Nothing inside but a half-empty container of blueberries and an expired bottle of salad dressing. She shut the door. The house echoed like a cathedral. Her father hadn't said goodbye on the phone. Just hung up. Not out of anger. Because there was nothing left to say. He hadn't just lost a company. He'd watched the son-in-law he dismissed as reliable but irrelevant outmaneuver every board member, every executive, every lawyer he trusted. And worst of all, she realized now, he knew she was the reason. Every smirk, every leak, every late night that became public ammunition. She had mocked the wrong man. And he hadn't just survived. He had waited. Wednesday, 7:58 a.m. The town car, din 12 cent, smelled like dry-cleaned leather and quiet decisions. No one greeted her when she arrived. Just a laminated pass in a white envelope handed off by a junior HR rep who barely made eye contact. The pass read, Exit interview, 8:30 a.m. No title, no department, just her name. She stepped through the revolving glass doors one last time, her heels clicking against the polished floors that once carried her with power. The lobby hadn't changed, same layout, same artwork, same security desk. But something in the air was different. Still, hollow, like the building had expelled its old bloodstream and was learning to breathe all over again. She adjusted her blazer, the same navy one she wore during Q2 investor briefings. Back when people listened, the security guard at the desk didn't look up, just slid her badge across the scanner, then motioned toward the elevators. But as she stepped forward, something in the periphery caught her eye. A nameplate, a new one, on the door she used to call hers. She froze. Her feet actually stopped moving, just shy of the elevators. She turned. Slowly. The blinds were open this time. And there it was. Bold black lettering, crisp and new. Michael Langston, Senior Strategic Partner, Dentwell Holdings. Her throat closed. She stepped closer, like someone walking toward a cliff's edge, hoping the fall would make more sense up close. The office was quiet, empty, but untouched. His desk was clean, organized. No pictures, no clutter, just one object. A small silver compass, its needle still. The same one she once gave him as a gift. An inside joke from their honeymoon. Back when he used to get lost on hiking trails and she'd pretend to know the way. Back when she still looked at him like he mattered. She hadn't seen that compass in years. She stood there, fingers barely grazing the glass, when movement caught her eye. Across the lobby, he was standing near the far wall. Her husband, Michael, hands in his pockets. Calm, not smug, not cruel, just unreadable. He didn't walk over. He didn't wave. He simply nodded once. Not a greeting, a conclusion. And then he turned, walked away. No final words. No I told you so. No grand speech. He didn't need one. Because this wasn't revenge. It was design. She stood there, alone in a lobby that used to carry her name in bold across press releases, watching the man she'd dismissed as a spreadsheet robot disappear through doors she no longer had access to. He hadn't just left her. He'd surpassed her. Silently. Systematically. Permanently. And she, who once thought she held all the leverage, now stood with nothing but a badge that would deactivate by noon, a reputation stripped bare, and a name no one in the building would say out loud anymore. The only sound left was the soft buzz of the elevators behind her, and the quiet realization that this ending had been written the night she smirked and said, "He won't do anything." He did everything.